Leslie, would you just like me to start out?
Yes,
All right.
I would.
Perfect. First of all, thank you for having me here. I suspect there's a number of highly qualified people that could come in and talk about the state's or a prosecution's perspective on cases involving homicides in which mothers are the suspects. But I am guessing that because of my most recent case that's gone through our local court system, and the notoriety that went along with that, I made a logical choice for that. As Leslie indicated, I've been a prosecutor in the District Attorney's Office here in Lane County for about 16 years. The last 6 of that I've been on our major crimes team, which predominantly handles the bulk of the child sexual assault and sexual abuse cases, as well as a host of other violent felony crimes, up to and including aggravated murder. And while I've been on that team, I've seen a number of cases, dealt with a number of death investigations that were non-criminal or may have been criminal, but the suspect was one of the individuals who was deceased, so there was no one left to prosecute. So I've got, I think, some fair perspective on the state's role of enforcing the laws in regard to protection of children or seeking justice for victims of crimes, including homicides that are perpetrated by parents. I'm kind of glad to hear that some people are interested in the child abuse reporting or mandatory reporting aspect as an aside, because I actually was listening to the opening comments. And because that's something that actually I've spent a fair amount of time training the Lane County Bar Association and CLEs, and most recently an in-office CLE, Mr. Hall would know about. He was there heckling me from the back of the room. But it's an important area of law to know, particularly because it doesn't matter what your area of practice is going to be. You as a lawyer do have some mandatory reporting requirements, and although the university's standpoint may be that you're not mandatory reporters, my take on that is, why wouldn't we be? Why wouldn't we report suspicious behavior where it appears that a child may be abused in some way? So that's my 2 cents. I'm not going to be around for whatever your training is, so I'm going to tell you right now my plug is for protecting kids. I'm also a member of our statutorily required multidisciplinary team. Every county is required to compile a group, cross-representatives of the community, investigation, mental health, medical providers, law enforcement, to discuss child abuse cases. And so I routinely meet to discuss all the children who've been coming through the system, being forensically interviewed for allegations or suspicion of abuse. So this is an area that's pretty near and dear to my heart. Our talk today, though, is focused on homicides, and it's focused on mothers, in fact, being the perpetrators of those homicides. And when we're talking about that, I think it's important to differentiate that when we're judging mothers who kill, from our office's perspective and the perspective of law enforcement, there's actually a wide spectrum of types of cases that come through our door. Anything from what would maybe determine SIDS-like events from children who have been crushed by a parent during the middle of the night because the child's been, the infant is in bed with the parent and the parent rolls over on the child, or for some other reason the child ends up either suffocating or the cause of death is indeterminable. We're dealing with accidental deaths in that respect. Vehicular crashes in which a parent there may be some criminal aspect to it. A child of theirs died in what we typically call accidents. Prosecutors don't call them accidents, we call them collisions. But we're talking about non-intentional or non-purposeful conduct that results in the death of a child, and we get cases like that. We get children who have been killed by a parent in that setting. We also have cases that come through our doors where the death is as a result of neglect, and those can include neglect or abuse in the sense, some of you may have followed cases. Seems to me we get a disproportionate number out of the population center up in Portland out of Washington County and Clackamas County of parents who have neglected medical treatment for their child that could have been saved, but some of them are termed fake healing cases where their religions in fact dictate their decision not to get common medical care, and their children die as a result. Again, those are non-intentional or apparent non-intentional homicides. Then there are cases in which the mothers are the ones who actually perpetuate abuse that results in the death of a child. They may not have been intending to kill their child, but their child dies as a result of abusive trauma. And conversely, we have cases in which moms stand by when they have a legal duty to their child and they watch their boyfriend or their husband abuse their child to death. Well, one of the more notable examples of that was a case back in the mid-90s involving a young girl, 3 years old, named Tessa McCall. Some of you may either remember or be familiar with that case, in which Jesse Compton was the mother's boyfriend, was ultimately convicted of aggravated murder and is on Oregon's death row right now for that death. And the child's mother, Stella Kaiser, was successfully prosecuted for aggravated murder as well, but is serving a sentence of life in prison without the possibility of parole. And then up to and including intentional murder. There's a case in this last year, I believe, all the time flies, it may have been more than a year ago. Her name was Amanda Stott Smith. It was up in the Portland area. She'd thrown her children off the Selwood Bridge intentionally. The daughter survived, if I remember correctly, but the younger son died as a result, died of drowning as a result of not being able to tread water like his older sister could. So again, in talking about the perspective of what we do in this, we're faced with a vast number of different factual scenarios. And the punishment or the involvement or even the prosecution or lack of prosecution on those cases typically revolves around not just the caused death, that's clearly the result, but the mens rea, the culpable mental state of the person who's perpetrated the actions against the child or the causation of the death to begin with. And so, again, we see a wide variety of cases, and so and under the umbrella of judging murders who kill, the most important thing from our perspective to start out with in that analysis is what's going on in the mind of the actor when this child dies as a result of either abusive trauma or neglect. And so, of course, some of you may have read even the paper today in City Region. There was some commentary regarding a pending case that our office is prosecuting involving a mother who's alleged to have killed her infant at birth. I can't talk very much about that, and I will tell you up front that I'm not in a position to answer a lot of questions about that because our office actually is under a gag order from Judge Shanti regarding that case. But again, this issue of parents and specifically mothers engaging in filicidal or homicidal conduct towards a child or children, usually their own, isn't just something that happens once in a blue moon. It seems sadly as if it comes up with some frequency. And Leslie mentioned the Diane Downs case, which is some years ago, but probably Oregon and certainly Lane County's most notorious parent murder case. And so that prosecution is going on, but the last one that our office resolved was the case that I handled. That was the cases against Richard and Angela McAnulty. Some of you who are familiar or read through some of the materials that were put on the website regarding the local reporting of that will recall that that's a mother, a biological mother of the victim, and then a stepfather who was in a position of care, custody, and control of the child as well, which ended up actually with Angela McAnulty being the first woman to lead out a death row in Oregon since we reinstated the death penalty in Oregon in 1984. I don't really want to get into a death penalty debate here. I'm sure people typically have strong feelings about that, but let's just say that this is one of the types of crimes that qualifies for capital punishment. And our office had some particular motivation to carry forward with that. And ironically, it deals in part from proportionality arguments that defense attorneys have made over the years about when a prosecutor chooses to seek that penalty versus when they don't. I will say that the facts of the case were so heinous that as an office, not only did we think that it may have been the right thing to do for that case, but we felt like it would be difficult to justify ever seeking that in another case if we didn't in this case. At least I'll allow the jury to make that decision. Some of you may be curious about the case, and your materials actually I thought did a fine job. Some of the materials that were listed, including the unauthored piece, who I've now determined or learned who did that about mad or bad, judging mothers who kill children, really bring to the forefront that I think our natural inclination in these cases is to think that if a mother engages in conduct against their own child, that's almost per se insanity. They must be crazy. There must be something mentally wrong with this person to engage in that conduct. And in fact, that was explored in the McAnulty case. And without getting into a long analysis, her defense lawyers, who were very experienced, felt it would not be to her advantage to advocate an insanity defense in that case because of the problems that they would have both on their experts being cross-examined and the ability of our experts to have access to her at that point. So that was explored in that case, and in the end, even though she had been seen by multiple mental health experts that would have been qualified to come in and testify to her mental condition, they chose to abandon that as an avenue of defense because of the problems that it would have raised for her in their overall attempts to save her life from the standpoint of the penalty phase. And so I'm happy to answer specific questions about that, but given our time constraints and the fact I've probably already eaten at my 15 minutes, I'll leave it at that, and I'm here to answer questions. And like I said, I'm glad so many of you are interested in this hopefully from the child protection angle, but whatever your slant is on this, hopefully your time will not have been wasted coming in today.